Welcome to Humanitarian Horizons. I'm Christina DiArcangelo. Today, we're going to be discussing one of the most consequential periods in modern history, the COVID-19 pandemic. This episode is not about reliving the pandemic. It's about asking difficult questions. Questions about transparency, accountability, scientific integrity, and rigor. And questions about what happens when the public trust is broken. Regardless of political affiliation, one fact remains the same. COVID-19 changed the lives of billions of people around the world. Families lost loved ones, businesses closed, children missed years of normal development. Healthcare professionals faced unimaginable challenges. Researchers raced to develop treatments and vaccines under extraordinary circumstances. The decisions during those years affected nearly every person on Earth. That is why those decisions deserve a continued examination. Science depends on trust. Healthcare depends on trust. Government depends on trust. When trust begins to erode, the consequences extend far beyond one crisis. Throughout the pandemic, public guidance evolved as scientists learned more about the virus. That evolution is a normal part of science, but many people felt confused or frustrated by changing recommendations. Debates over masking, school closures, vaccine mandates, and public health restrictions became deeply polarizing. Some people believe these measures were necessary to save lives. Others believe certain policies went too far or lacked sufficient transparency and clinical data. Reasonable people can agree to disagree on policies. What should never be acceptable is suppressing honest scientific debate or discouraging legitimate questions. During the pandemic, I was working on and in the regulated pharmaceutical environment on efforts related to COVID-19 therapeutics. Our focus was not on vaccines. We were pursuing potential treatments through the FDA, EUA regulatory process. Anyone who has worked in drug development understands that bringing a potential therapy forward is extraordinarily difficult. It requires scientific rigor, regulatory compliance, documentation, and collaboration. In my experience, the environment surrounding COVID-19 became increasingly challenging for those pursuing approaches outside of the mainstream public conversation. I also experienced what I believe was significant during one of our FDA submissions. After first filing through the FDA CDER portal, our team identified that we believed a Trojan virus associated with the submission process was placed on my filing in the FDA portal. We reported our concerns through the appropriate White House channels, including notifying officials at that time. Those events remain part of my personal experience, and I continue to believe they deserve careful examination. You'll remember in the mainstream media, it came out probably in around June during this crisis, initially with COVID, that the FDA had been hacked by 3 different countries. I believe that we were the ones who tipped off, specifically in the beginning, the White House, that there was even an issue. They didn't know. The FDA didn't know. As a matter of fact, when I did my filing and received the email, the automatic email that comes out of the FDA portal, it gave me a number, and then the FDA couldn't find it. So I knew there was a problem. That's how it all started, and it was a mess. I'm not gonna lie to you. I was on Zoom with, I don't know, 11 or 12 FDA IT people trying to figure out what happened. So I remember specifically this happening, and it was very scary at the time. The fact that I had been working in the FDA environment, i.e. in drug development over, years and years and years. This had never happened to me. And it was scary that it happens. And that means that somebody got into my filing because I used certain words that I needed to use as a requirement pursuant to the FDA under the EUA guidance. The other issue that I want to discuss is social media, why there was censorship. Many researchers, physicians, scientists, entrepreneurs, patients felt their voices were restricted during the pandemic. I can tell you personally, my voice was restricted. I had a podcast. We were running things through the podcast. We were doing all kinds of things. We were talking about issues. We were helping patients that were COVID patients through the nonprofit Affinity Patient Advocacy. We were working through my CRO on actual treatments for COVID. I mean, we were doing everything we were supposed to be doing. And when I would talk about certain things that I believed were not true based on the experience that I have working on several vaccines throughout my career that got FDA approval, I was censored constantly. My posts were dropped down, and it was almost like working in cannabis back in the day when you were blacked out. That's what we called it, when you couldn't see our posts anymore because we were talking about cannabinoids. So it was the same type of thing. What happened was social media companies faced unprecedented pressure to address misinformation. However, they blocked the truth. When there were true things being said, they were told by the White House to censor. This came out in plenty of hearings with Zuckerberg, wherein they discussed this. The balance between protecting public health and preserving open scientific dialogue remains one of the defining questions of our time. History has shown science advances through questioning, testing, challenging assumptions, and evaluating evidence, not through silencing debate. Leadership during a public health emergency carries extraordinary responsibility. Public officials must communicate clearly. They must acknowledge uncertainty when it exists. They must remain transparent about evolving evidence, and they must be willing to answer difficult questions. Congressional investigations and public testimony related to the government's pandemic response have continued long after the initial emergency ended. Those proceedings reflect the importance of oversight in a democratic society. Oversight is not about assigning blame for every difficult decision. It is about understanding what happened, learn from our mistakes, and improve future responses. COVID-19 strengths within our healthcare system. It did expose strengths within our healthcare system. It also exposed weaknesses. We learned that global supply chains were very fragile. We learned that the regulatory systems must remain agile without compromising scientific standards. We learned how quickly misinformation and fear can spread. And perhaps most importantly, we learned that public trust is one of the most valuable resources during a crisis. Once trust is lost, rebuilding is incredibly difficult. As someone who spent decades working with healthcare, pharmaceutical development, regulatory strategy, and patient advocacy, I believe our goal should never be to divide the people. Our goal should be to improve systems designed to protect them. Patients deserve transparency. Patients deserve the truth. Patients deserve clinical data that's true and has not been altered. Researchers deserve the opportunity to pursue innovative science. It doesn't have to be necessarily what was set forth by Big Pharma. Are you following me? Healthcare professionals deserve evidence-based guidance, and the public deserves honest communication, even when the answers are complex. History will continue to examine the COVID-19 pandemic for generations. The conversations we have today will shape our future generations to be able to respond to the next, God forbid, public health emergency. We should encourage rigorous science. We should welcome respectful disagreement, and we should strengthen accountability. Whoever has made all these decisions needs to be held accountable to the public who was severely impacted by this. Watching Fauci yesterday testify, or lack of testify, I should say, because he pled the fifth, I think it was 111 times, was absolutely lunacy. Not to mention that he had been pardoned by Joe Biden with the electronic pen to begin with. I mean, this is absolutely mind-blowing to watch all this go down and think about all the years that I have been in drug development and all the clinical studies that I've worked on and all of the things that we had to do in order to get drugs approved so the FDA approved them, to see all this happen right before our eyes for those of us that actually understood what was going on. It's just, I mean, it just punched me in the gut yesterday. We need to remember that every policy, every recommendation, and every decision ultimately affects humans' lives. This is why conversations matter. Thank you for joining me on Humanitarian Horizons. If this episode resonated with you, please subscribe, share it with others, continue engaging in thoughtful conversations grounded in evidence, integrity, and compassion. Until next time, I am Christina DiArcangelo, reminding you that humanity is the strongest when we seek truth, protect dignity, and always remember that humanity deserves the right to ask questions that matter. Thank you again.